My name is Bonita. I'm 34 years old. And this is the story of how giving birth alone wasn't the most painful part, it was realizing who never planned to show up in the first place. I still remember the moment like it happened just hours ago. My hands trembled as I stared down at the pregnancy test, 2 pink lines clear as day. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. That small piece of plastic might as well have been a golden ticket. I had dreamt of this day since I was a little girl holding a baby doll against my chest. I wanted to be a mother more than I wanted anything else in the world. My heart swelled, pounding in my chest. I opened the bathroom door like I had just won the lottery. "Logan," I called, gripping the test like it was proof of a miracle. "Come here. I have something important." He sat on the couch, slouched, phone in hand, eyes glued to a game. He didn't even flinch. Barely looked up. He muttered. Then his eyes flicked toward the test I held out. "Oh. Okay." That was all he said. I waited, hoping for a smile, a hug, even a flicker of surprise. But his eyes were already back on the screen, his thumb moving in steady rhythm. "Aren't you happy?" I asked, swallowing down the growing knot in my throat. "Yeah," he said, monotone. "Happy. I'm just thinking. This is big." I nodded, lips trembling. "Okay," I whispered, walking back into the bathroom and shutting the door behind me. That moment I had built up in my mind, the joy, the connection, the tears, died before it ever began. I sat on the edge of the tub, cradling the test in both hands like it was some fragile little thing I had to protect alone. That night I didn't sleep. Logan did, of course. Deep and dreamless. I lay awake listening to the steady rise and fall of his breath while staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a mistake marrying a man who couldn't even say the word baby without sounding inconvenienced. The next morning, I cooked breakfast, his favorite, sunny-side-up eggs with turkey bacon and sourdough toast. I even sliced the avocado the way he liked. I placed the plate in front of him with a soft smile. He didn't look up. "Logan, I think we should schedule our first prenatal appointment," I said gently. "What do you think?" He blinked. "You go ahead and schedule it. I'm slammed with meetings this week." A dull cold settled into my chest. "Right. Okay," I said, taking a sip of lukewarm tea to keep from crying. "I'll handle it." And so I did. I handled everything. Vitamins. Research. Diet changes. Exercises. I even wrote a little pregnancy journal in a blue notebook I bought from the local bookstore. On the cover, I taped the ultrasound photo from my first appointment, an image I saw alone while Logan texted me from his office saying, "Sorry babe, crazy day." He hadn't even asked if it went well. I tried one last time to pull him into it. At 10 weeks, I cooked dinner and set candles on the table. I'd bought a tiny white pair of baby shoes and put them in a box beside his plate. "Maybe we can take announcement photos soon?" I offered. "Something small. Sweet." He glanced at the box, didn't open it. "Don't make a big deal out of this, Bonita. It's early. Let's just take it slow." I smiled, but something cracked inside me. I told myself maybe he just needed time. But as the weeks passed and his distance only grew, I started to understand, I would be doing this without him even if he was physically present. When I told his mother, Kayla, her face scrunched up like I'd announced a death instead of a life. "You look pale already," she said. "Are you sure you're cut out for this?" His sister Megan laughed and muttered something about hormonal sensitivity. Even my own mother, whom I desperately hoped would show warmth, simply said, "When I had you and your brothers, I didn't have time to get emotional. You'll get over it." But one person did show up. My best friend from college, Layla. The day I came back from my second appointment alone, she texted, "I'm picking you up tomorrow morning. I don't care what you say." She showed up with a warm egg sandwich and a bottle of soy milk. "Eat, or you'll faint and leave me delivering this baby myself," she joked. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. From that point forward, Lila never missed an appointment. She was the one who brought me a pregnancy pillow when my back started to ache. She downloaded a playlist of soft music for my sleepless nights. She even started talking to the bump, cooing, "Little Peanut, your auntie's here." I didn't deserve her kindness, but I clung to it. As the due date neared, I tried again to involve Logan. I'd packed snacks, a charger, and even folded his sweatshirt to keep in my hospital bag. But the night the pain started, sharp, sudden, and rhythmic, he rolled over when I nudged him. "Bonita, it's your first. These things take forever. Let me sleep." "But I think, Logan, I think this is it." "Then call your mom or something. Or that friend of yours," he muttered, pulling the covers over his face. I sat there, hand over my belly, contractions tearing through my core, and whispered to myself, "It's okay, baby. I've got you. I'll get us there." I texted Lila. I didn't even need to explain. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later. She stood in the rain, coat soaked, eyes wide with concern. "Let's go," she said. As we drove through the storm, I clenched the door handle with one hand and my phone in the other. A message buzzed from Logan. But it wasn't for me. "Game's intense. Went into overtime, basketball, beer mug." That was all he had to say. The pain tore through me again, not just physical, but the ache of realizing you were never a priority. Never even in the game. At the hospital, they asked where the father was. I said, "Busy." And Lila just held my hand tighter. 10 hours. 10 hours of pushing, crying, screaming through contractions as thunder echoed outside. Every time the door opened, I hoped Logan would step in. He never did. But my son did arrive. A tiny, pink, perfect baby boy. And in that soft, quiet moment, the nurse came in with a small silver box. "To be given only if you gave birth alone." I stared at it, the nurse's words circling my ears like a spell. Inside that box was something I never expected, my father's voice, reaching out from beyond the grave. And that was only the beginning. The silver box sat beside my bed like it didn't belong in this world, gleaming, elegant, quiet. But everything about it screamed. It whispered every fear I had buried deep for months. The nurse said it was to be delivered only if I gave birth alone, if no husband, no family, no one from his side showed up. And none of them had. Lila picked it up carefully, her fingers running over the delicate engraving on the lid. "Bonita," she said softly, "look. It's from your father's attorneys." My breath caught. Henderson and Wood. My father's lawyers. The same men I spoke to after his funeral. The men who handled his estate when he died suddenly from a stroke 8 months ago. I never imagined they were still doing anything on his behalf. Yet there it was, a note taped to the top. To be delivered only if Ms. Bonita Carter delivers her child without the presence of Mr. Logan Pierce or any family member. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Lila untied the tiny brass key from the string and handed it to me. I hesitated. My hands trembled. I don't know if I can." "You can," she said firmly. "He left this for you, Bonita. That means he knew. And he wanted you to have this when it mattered most." I clicked the lock open with shaking fingers. Inside was a thick envelope, resting in a nest of navy velvet. It was sealed with red wax and stamped with the Carter family crest, something I hadn't seen since I was a little girl watching my father seal letters at his desk. The scent hit me first. That faint, crisp paper smell, like old libraries and worn books. I opened it slowly. "To my daughter Bonita. If you're reading this, my greatest fear has come true. You brought life into this world surrounded by silence, not love. No man by your side. No family holding your hand. And that breaks my heart. I clutched the letter to my chest, already sobbing. I saw it long before you did. The way Logan looked at you like you were a burden, not a blessing. The way his mother treated you like a temporary visitor, not a daughter-in-law. And I watched you try so hard to earn their love. But darling, love should never be earned through suffering. It should be given. Freely. Loudly. Without condition. Each line felt like a bomb and a wound at once. So I made sure if they abandoned you, they would never be able to take anything from you again. I left you something. Not because I think you need it to survive, but because I want you and your child to start free. Unchained. The next page was a list. Typed and notarized. The deed to 115 Maple Lane. A fully renovated 3-bedroom home, estimated value, $1.3 million. In my name. 15% ownership in Clean Leaf Organics. An eco-cosmetics company I didn't even know my father had invested in. Annual return, $75,000. Deposited directly to my personal account. A $250,000 trust for my son. Restricted until his 18th birthday. For college or to start a business. And then, a final statement, printed in bold. No individual from the Pierce family, including Logan Pierce, Kayla Pierce, or Megan Pierce, shall be granted access, entitlement, or claim to any part of this estate. All assets and protections are reserved solely for Bonita Carter and her child. Lila let out a stunned breath. Your dad, he thought of everything. I nodded slowly, numb, my tears silent now. He did more for me in death than they ever did in life. But it wasn't over. As I lifted the velvet lining inside the silver box, I noticed a seam. I tilted the box. Something shifted beneath. With careful fingers, Lila pulled at the edge and uncovered a hidden compartment. A second envelope. This one didn't carry a seal. Just 2 words, scrawled in my father's handwriting. When the truth must come to light. Inside were pages. Dozens of them. Printouts of text messages. Email threads. Screenshots. Dates. Times. Phone numbers. Conversations I was never meant to see. I read the first one. It was Logan. Sent to someone named Greg B. She's too soft. She'll forgive anything. Just need to hold on till the baby's born. Then I'm out. I flipped to the next. Her crying again. It's so annoying. I wish she'd just lose it and leave first. Next. Pushing her to the edge is the only way. If she breaks down, it makes court easier. She's not mentally stable. Court? Court for what? Then another message from Megan. We just need to show she's overwhelmed. If she has a breakdown, custody leans toward Logan. Play the long game. I stopped breathing. Every emotion I had, grief, betrayal, rage, swirled like a tornado inside me. They weren't just indifferent. They weren't just careless. They were planning something. Preparing to tear me down in court. Take my baby. Paint me as unfit. The distant stares. The silence. The refusal to come with me to appointments. It wasn't neglect. It was a setup. My father had known. And he left the proof. Layla looked pale. She held the stack in her hands like it was poison. They were going to take your son, Bonita. They were going to take him from you. I stared down at my sleeping newborn, his face so small, peaceful, unaware of the war that nearly came for him before he even had a name. Then something inside me solidified. Hardened. I won't let them near him, I said, each word sharp and clear. Ever. The next day, Logan walked in. He wore a crisp button-down, clean-shaven, holding red roses like we were high schoolers in a drama club play. Behind him, Megan carried gift bags and baby clothes still in their department store packaging. She smiled nervously. "Eva," Logan started. I didn't speak. I motioned for Lila to hand me the papers. I placed them, every printed message, every email, every screenshot, right on the table between us. "Before you say anything," I said calmly, "read this." Logan's smile faltered. Megan's hands went still. They read. And their faces changed. First confusion. Then panic. Then horror. This isn't what I meant," Logan stammered. "Bonita, this was taken out of context." I tilted my head. "Oh? Which part? I just hope she breaks before the baby arrives? Or the one where Megan said it would help you in court if I had a breakdown?" Megan tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "You don't speak for me. Not anymore." Logan stepped forward, eyes wide. "Bonita, please. I know I messed up. But we're family." I stood slowly, my baby in my arms. "You were never my family. You just pretended long enough to steal one." Lila stepped beside me, her presence like steel. "We're leaving," I said. "You don't get to come back from this." The look on his face, defeated, small, crumbling beneath the truth, was one I'd never forget. And I wasn't done yet. Because what they didn't know was that the house I was taking my son to wasn't an apartment, or a temporary stay. It was 115 Maple Lane. Paid in full. Mine. We left the hospital the following morning, not with tears or hugs or a farewell from family, but with silence, dignity, and something far more powerful than forgiveness, freedom. Lila helped me into the back seat as I gently cradled my newborn son. The car door shut softly behind me, cutting off the last echoes of Logan's weak apologies. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of his face through the hospital window, hollow-eyed, frozen. Megan stood behind him with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. But I didn't care. Their chapter in our lives was over. The drive to 115 Maple Lane was quiet, peaceful, almost surreal. I sat in the back with my son tucked against my chest, breathing in the soft scent of baby powder and lavender oil. Lila glanced at me in the mirror, her eyes tender. "You okay?" I nodded. "I'm not sad," I said quietly. "I think I'm finally safe." When the GPS announced you have arrived, my heart swelled. The home stood behind a row of flowering cherry trees, their pale pink petals falling like snow in the breeze. The red-tiled roof glowed softly under the morning sun. A wide porch with white railings wrapped around the front, and there were wind chimes swaying gently by the steps. It looked like a dream, like the dream my father had told me about when I was little. The home he'd always wanted to build for me when I was grown. The one I never thought I'd see. Lila parked, then came around to help with the bags. I stepped onto the porch, holding my son close, and whispered, "Welcome home, James." Inside, everything was already arranged. The smell of cedar and fresh paint lingered in the air. A cozy fireplace in the living room. Hardwood floors that gleamed like honey. There were soft blue curtains in the nursery, and a crib placed by the window, lined with tiny safari animals. A note rested on the mantel, written in my father's handwriting. "I hope you never have to use this house under sad circumstances. But if you do, let it become a place of healing, not just refuge. You are stronger than you know." I cried quietly, standing in the middle of the nursery. Lila wrapped her arm around me, her voice low. "He built this for you, Bonita. He gave you a way out before you even knew you needed it." That afternoon, as I rocked James in the porch swing, the warmth of the sun on our skin, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in months: peace. But peace didn't mean the world outside forgot me. Logan's texts began to flood in that evening. "Bonita, please just talk to me. I didn't mean for any of that to happen. You can't just take him and leave. That's not fair to me. I have a right to see my son." I didn't respond. My silence became my strongest voice. Then Megan started in. Bonita, you're being overdramatic. That stuff was just talk, we never did anything. Let's just meet and talk like adults. Don't let your emotions ruin this for everyone. Lila snorted as she read the messages. Funny how they're panicking now that you've taken control. I blocked them both. Days passed, and I settled into a quiet rhythm. Feedings. Diaper changes. Walks through the garden with James wrapped in a soft sling. At night, I would hum the lullabies my father used to sing, the ones I hadn't heard in years. Sometimes I felt like he was right there beside me, especially when the wind moved through the trees just so, as if whispering reassurance. I knew Logan would try something. His pride couldn't take the silence. And I was right. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Petition for paternal visitation rights, Pierce, Logan. I stared at it without blinking. Lila cursed under her breath when she saw it. He doesn't give up, does he? But what Logan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my father hadn't just given me a house and a trust fund. He'd given me something else. Something far more valuable. Evidence. I called Henderson and Wood the next morning. Mr. Keller, my father's longtime lawyer, answered. Bonita, he said warmly. We've been expecting your call. I met him at the firm that same afternoon. The conference room was cool and quiet, sunlight pouring through tall windows. He handed me a thick folder. Your father gave us very specific instructions. If Logan or anyone in his family attempted legal action, this would be your defense. Inside were notarized documents, printed screenshots, phone logs, and even a sworn statement from a former coworker of Megan's, detailing how she had once bragged about getting rid of the baby drama soon. Your father was careful. These messages can establish intent, malicious, manipulative behavior. Especially when paired with the timing of your labor and their absence. It paints a very clear picture. I stared down at the papers, heart pounding. This will hold up in court? It's more than enough to not only block visitation, but possibly press for sole custody with protective conditions. My breath caught. I wasn't just fighting to protect myself anymore. I was protecting James. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. And in those 2 weeks, Logan transformed himself into the father of the year. Or tried to. He posted photos of baby clothes. Quoted parenting books. Shared vague status updates like doing what's best for my family. Growth starts with accountability. Friends of friends sent screenshots. Layla rolled her eyes. Too little, too late. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom in a soft blue blouse and charcoal slacks, my hair neatly tied back. I carried James in a sling against my chest, his tiny body nestled in peace. Lila walked beside me, her presence as constant as the heartbeat I once hoped Logan would care to hear. Logan was already seated with his lawyer. His eyes lit up when he saw James, like the baby was a trophy he'd forgotten to claim. But I didn't look at him. I focused on the judge. When the evidence was presented, the courtroom fell into a tense silence. The judge flipped through the printed messages, brow furrowed, then read aloud portions that made even Logan squirm in his seat. Then Megan was called to testify. She looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile, even. She tried to cry. Claimed it was miscommunication, that they were only trying to help Logan through a tough time. But the damage was done. The judge ruled in my favor. Full custody. No visitation. No contact without written consent. Logan stood there stunned, his lawyer whispering in his ear. But his shoulders slumped. He didn't fight. Because you can't fight when the truth is that ugly and documented. Outside the courthouse, Layla wrapped an arm around me. You did it, she said. No, I whispered. My dad did. That night, I sat in the nursery with James asleep in my arms. The stars outside twinkled like tiny whispers of hope, and the wind gently rocked the branches outside. The house at 115 Maple Lane was no longer just a gift. It was our beginning. The courthouse ruling sent shockwaves through Logan's carefully curated world. He tried to maintain his polished social media persona, posting vague quotes about self-growth, healing, and parenting as a journey. But behind the hashtags, I knew he was unraveling. He hadn't just lost control. He lost the narrative. And that terrified him. I stayed quiet, never responding. I didn't need to defend myself. I had the truth, the law, and most importantly, my son. James. He was growing fast. Each morning he woke with a soft coo that melted me. His eyes, deep, searching, seemed to carry the wisdom of someone who had already witnessed life's cruelty and somehow chose to trust anyway. I took long walks with him tucked against my chest in the baby sling, down the tree-lined sidewalk of Maple Lane. Neighbors waved. Some recognized my father's name and stopped to say they'd known him. What a kind, smart man he was. I'd nod, tears always threatening to spill. One woman, Mrs. Haverly, brought over an apple pie one afternoon and said, "He used to talk about you like the sun rose just to greet your smile, dear." That night, I cried. Not because I was sad. But because I missed him so much. And because I was finally giving my son the kind of home my father had always hoped I'd have. But Logan wasn't done trying. 2 days after the court ruling, he sent an email. "Bonita. I understand the ruling, but please. Let me just meet him. One time. I made mistakes, but don't let James grow up not knowing his father." Attached was a photo of a nursery, his. A freshly painted blue room, with a crib, a rocking horse, a teddy bear with tags still attached. It was all for show. Everything Logan ever did was for appearance. For approval. He wanted to be seen as a father, not be one. I closed the email and deleted it. That night, as I sat beside James's crib humming a soft tune, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message. From Megan. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her face appeared on screen, worn and anxious. She was sitting in what looked like her car. "Bonita, you don't have to answer. I need to say something. I thought it would be funny. Pushing you. Seeing how far you'd go before snapping. I didn't know Logan would actually follow through. I didn't think he'd really try to get custody. I thought it was a bluff. Just a game." She wiped at her eyes. Whether they were real tears or guilt-induced ones, I couldn't tell. "You probably won't believe this, but I think about what we did all the time. You deserved better. You were always so hopeful. And we were cruel. I'm sorry. I am." The video ended. No demands. No defense. Just that. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then closed it, too. Because no apology in the world could erase what she had done. Days turned into weeks. James was growing stronger. His little fingers now gripped my thumb tighter every day. He was smiling, big open-mouthed grins that made me forget, even for a second, the storm I had walked through to get here. Layla remained my rock. She came by nearly every day. Helped me sort through old files my father had left behind. She painted a mural in James's room, soft clouds and stars and a smiling moon. She stayed up late with me when James wouldn't sleep and even cooked when my exhaustion took over. One evening, as we sat on the back porch sipping chamomile tea, she asked, "Do you think Logan's going to try again?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. But he won't get far. He's dangerous when he's losing. I know, I said. But I'm not scared anymore. Because I wasn't. Not of Logan. Not of Megan. Not of judgment or family or lies or courtrooms. I had walked through fire and come out holding the most precious life in the world, and a legacy of strength passed down from a man who had protected me even from the grave. And then came the knock. It was a Tuesday afternoon. James was asleep. The house smelled like lemon oil from the floors I had just mopped, and the sound of lullaby music drifted softly through the baby monitor. The knock was sharp, deliberate. I opened the door to find Penelope Pierce, Logan's mother, standing there in a pale lavender suit and pearls. Hair pulled back. No smile. "Penelope," I said calmly. She looked me over like I was something she'd ordered from a catalog but changed her mind about once it arrived. "I came to speak about my grandson," she said. My hand instinctively went to the baby monitor. "I don't think there's anything to discuss." She didn't flinch. "Bonita, I don't agree with how Logan handled things. But a child should know their blood. I'm his grandmother." I stepped outside and closed the door gently behind me. "You're also the woman who once told me I wasn't fit to be a mother because I looked tired. The woman who watched her son vanish during my labor and didn't lift a finger." "I made mistakes," she said flatly. "No," I replied. "You made choices." She shifted her handbag. "You're not going to keep him from us forever." I smiled, not out of joy, but out of disbelief at her gall. "I don't need to. The court already did." Her mouth tightened. "You think you've won?" "No," I said. "I think I survived." "You're confusing the two." Penelope hesitated for the first time. She looked past me, toward the window where James's tiny swing was just visible. "Logan's going to try again. He always does." I nodded. "And I'll be ready." She turned to leave but paused at the bottom step. "You may think you're strong now, Bonita, but raising a child alone changes people." I smiled again, but this time there was fire behind it. "I'm not alone. I never was. I had the one man who never stopped believing in me, and now I have a son who gives me strength you'll never understand." I closed the door before she could reply. Behind me, James let out a soft cry through the monitor. I scooped him up, kissed his forehead, and held him close. Penelope's footsteps faded away, her presence no longer a shadow in our home. Later that night, as James lay sleeping on my chest, I looked around at everything I had rebuilt: peace, safety, love. Logan could threaten. Megan could regret. Penelope could demand. But none of them would ever set foot inside our world again. Because now it wasn't just about recovery. It was about defense. The rain fell hard that Friday morning, sharp, steady drops tapping on the windows like tiny fists trying to get in. James was napping in the bassinet beside the fireplace, his chest rising and falling gently beneath a pale green blanket. The whole house was wrapped in a strange kind of hush, like the air itself was holding its breath. Then came the envelope. It was slid under the door, no knock, no signature, just an ivory envelope with my name typed in all caps. Bonita Carter. Lila, who was just finishing folding baby clothes at the dining table, picked it up with narrowed eyes. "Another stunt?" I nodded slowly. "Has to be." I opened it with a butter knife, hands steady. Inside was a single page from Logan's attorney. Request to reopen custody and visitation hearing, new evidence submitted. Lila let out a sharp breath. "He's trying again." I wasn't surprised. I had expected it, actually. Logan wasn't the type to go away quietly, especially when control slipped through his fingers. But what chilled me wasn't the request. It was the final line of the notice. Evidence includes previously undisclosed mental health evaluations and claims of postpartum instability. My stomach dropped. Lila read over my shoulder. "That's dangerous. If they can make you seem unstable, they'll try to get supervised visitation, or worse." I felt the old panic rising. The fear. The trembling I'd worked so hard to bury. Then I caught sight of James, sleeping so peacefully. I took a deep breath, stood up straighter. They're bluffing, I said. Or they're forging. Either way. I'm done playing defense. We drove straight to Henderson and Wood. Mr. Keller welcomed us like we were soldiers returning to a second battlefield. Let me guess, he said, waving the letter I had faxed over that morning. He's trying to flip the script. He's trying to erase it, I replied, my voice hard. Well, lucky for us, Mr. Keller said, we don't just prepare. We document everything. He opened a file and handed me 2 letters, one from the OBGYN who had overseen my prenatal care and another from the hospital's attending physician. Patient has no history of mental instability. Maintained excellent prenatal care with appropriate emotional response to labor and postpartum care. They even included copies of logs showing my calm demeanor and Lila's support through delivery. There were no incidents. No outbursts. No notes that could be twisted. Logan had nothing real. Let them bring it, I said, rising from the table. We'll be ready. But it still hurt. Not because I was scared of losing, but because the man I had once married was now trying to paint me as broken to take something he never even cared enough to show up for. I drove home in silence, Lila in the passenger seat watching me with quiet concern. The rain was soft now, just a mist. It blurred the edges of the world like a dream dissolving. He's not going to stop, I said finally. Not until he's humiliated. Not until there's nothing left for him to spin. Then we give him what he's earned, Lila said. No more mercy. That night I stayed up long after James had fallen asleep. I went through every message, every voicemail, every email Logan had sent since the beginning. I gathered screenshots, time-stamped photos, proof of absence, missed appointments, lack of support, and his original texts, bragging about pushing me to the edge. It wasn't just a defense anymore. I was building a counterattack. The day of the hearing, I wore black. A tailored blouse, neat slacks, polished shoes. Not to mourn, but to bury what little hope Logan still had of manipulation. I entered the courtroom with James nestled against me, his presence a quiet, breathing symbol of everything Logan had failed to protect. Lila walked beside me, her eyes sharp as glass. Logan stood across the room, stiff in a suit he rarely wore. His lawyer, a different one this time, looked nervous. Unprepared. We sat. The judge looked tired already. Mr. Pierce, you have submitted new claims suggesting Ms. Carter may be emotionally unstable and suffering from postpartum distress. Is that correct? Logan's lawyer nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We believe it is in the best interest of the child that Mr. Pierce at least be granted supervised visitation. I sat motionless. Then Mr. Keller stood, calm and composed. Your Honor, we'd like to submit counter-evidence. Medical records, professional assessments, and sworn affidavits from licensed physicians stating clearly that Ms. Carter is emotionally stable, physically healthy, and in full capacity as a mother. He placed the folder on the judge's bench. We'd also like to submit communication logs between Mr. Pierce and third parties in which he describes calculated efforts to undermine Ms. Carter's mental health, as well as his intention to use those claims in court. The judge raised an eyebrow. Logan turned pale. Do you have that in writing? The judge asked. Mr. Keller didn't answer. He just opened the file and handed over a stack of printed messages. The same ones my father had saved. The same ones Megan had once tried to excuse. The courtroom went quiet. After a long pause, the judge exhaled through his nose. This isn't a custody dispute. This is a manipulation attempt. Mr. Pierce, I suggest you withdraw your petition unless you wish to be charged with perjury and fraud. Logan stammered. I just wanted to see my son. The judge cut him off. You had your chance. You missed his birth. You mocked the mother. You created a trail of evidence outlining your intent to push her to collapse. He banged the gavel once. Petition denied. Visitation suspended indefinitely. Any future requests must come through formal psychological evaluation and mediation. Court adjourned. Logan stood frozen. I rose slowly. Picked up James. Turned my back to him. I didn't need to say anything. The sound of his breathing, ragged, shallow, full of shame, was enough. Outside the courtroom, reporters had gathered. Word had spread. Estranged husband of young mother attempts custody after abandoning her during birth. I kept my head down. But Lila paused. Whispered in my ear, "You gave him a chance to be a man. He chose to be a weapon." I nodded. And now he gets to live with what he tried to destroy. That evening, I sat in the nursery, the warm hum of James's breathing filling the room. I wasn't just safe anymore. I was victorious. The walls of 115, Maple Lane no longer echoed with fear or silence. They sang with the rhythm of a life rebuilt. And Logan? He faded into a background he created himself. The following days passed in soft, golden silence. James was thriving, laughing now, reaching for my face with pudgy fingers, his wide eyes filled with wonder at even the smallest things. A breeze through the curtains. The jingle of his baby rattle. The hummingbird that visited our porch every morning like clockwork. And me? For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. Not just survive, but breathe. The court had closed the door on Logan. My father's foresight had laid down every stone on the path that protected my son. But even so, I knew people like Logan didn't just walk away quietly. Their egos didn't allow for that. They lingered. Lurked. Hoped for cracks in the wall so they could squeeze their poison back in. So when the letter from Logan's mother, Penelope, arrived, handwritten, on thick embossed stationery, I was more amused than shocked. It was short. Bonita. I don't expect forgiveness. But I do ask for access. I'd like to establish a connection with my grandson. I've done wrong. I know that. But surely a boy deserves a grandmother. She signed it with a flourish. With sincerity, Penelope Pierce. I folded the letter once and tossed it into the fireplace without a word. Let the flames eat what she tried to guilt me with. Penelope had her chance. She stood by while her son vanished during my labor, never lifted a finger to help, and then tried to clean up their image only after the court turned on them. I wasn't going to allow James to be anyone's redemption story. He deserved love. Not reputation management. Lila found me staring into the fire a few minutes later, James nestled asleep against my shoulder. Another olive branch? I nodded. Dried and dead. She smiled. They'll keep trying. Narcissists never quit, they just change tactics. I'm not worried, I said softly. My door's shut. For good. We stood there, watching the flames curl and snap, burning away the last trace of that family's entitlement. And then, something unexpected happened. The media got wind of the court documents. It started small, a blog post by a local mother's rights organization. Then a repost by a women's advocacy Twitter account. Before I knew it, my inbox was flooded with messages. Women I'd never met reaching out, saying, "Thank you for standing up. You gave me courage to leave. Your story made me believe I could be more than a victim." Lila saw the momentum and made a suggestion that would have terrified the old me. "Tell your story," she said. "But on your terms." At first, I hesitated. I wasn't an influencer. I wasn't an activist. I was just a mother who'd clawed her way through betrayal and barely made it out whole. But the idea haunted me. So one quiet Sunday morning, I sat on the porch swing, James cooing softly in my lap, and opened my laptop. I wrote for hours. I told it all. The cold silence of Logan's reaction to the pregnancy. His absence at every milestone. The brutal, lonely birth. The silver box my father had left behind. The messages. The betrayal. The courtroom. The justice. I didn't name names. But the truth was there, shining through every line. When I hit publish, I expected maybe a few likes. By the next morning, it had over 100,000 shares. Women and men were commenting, reposting, flooding my messages. It was a tidal wave of voices who had been waiting for someone to say what they were too afraid to speak aloud. Abuse doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it starves you of presence. Of warmth. Of acknowledgement. I received a call from a producer at a national podcast. Then an email from a book agent. Then another from a documentary team. It was overwhelming, surreal, but I chose carefully. I declined most of them. But I said yes to one, a small non-profit that supported single mothers and domestic abuse survivors. They wanted to start a campaign using my story, not as a tale of pity, but one of empowerment. So I spoke. Quietly. Honestly. And suddenly, Logan's narrative was dead. No carefully staged nursery photo could undo the truth. No bouquet of roses at the hospital could compete with the raw evidence of betrayal, indifference, and manipulation. His public mask shattered. A month later, a mutual acquaintance messaged me. Logan's employer just let him go. Cited reputational risk. Megan's firm dropped her too. I didn't gloat. I just closed the message and looked at James. I told you, I whispered. Mommy wasn't going to let them win. Then one day, something I never expected arrived. Not in the mail. Not on the phone. In person. It was nearly dusk, the sky painted in deep pinks and golds, when I saw a woman approaching the house on foot. She had dark curly hair pulled into a low bun and wore a simple gray cardigan. It was not Megan. It was Chloe. Logan's ex-girlfriend from before me. The one who vanished without explanation right before we started dating. She stopped at the porch gate and raised a hand timidly. Bonita? I stepped out onto the porch, cautious but curious. I'm sorry to show up like this, she said quickly. I saw the article. I read your story. I had to come. Why? I asked gently. Because I lived it too, she said. And I left before I could prove it. Chloe sat with me on the porch as the sun dipped below the trees. She told me everything. How Logan had manipulated her too, emotionally, psychologically. How he isolated her from her friends, made her question her sanity, guilt her for everything. How she'd wanted to stay, until she couldn't recognize herself anymore. But I never spoke up, she whispered. And when I saw what you did, I realized I owed it to someone. Maybe to myself. I reached for her hand. You owed it to you. Not to me. Not to anyone else. She smiled tearfully. I just wanted to say thank you. For surviving. When she left, I stood on the porch a little longer, holding James, who had just woken with a sleepy sigh. I looked out over the garden, the trees swaying gently in the twilight breeze. And for the first time, I realized something. I wasn't just rebuilding a life. I was lighting a path. One that others could follow. Because survival wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. The day James turned 6 months old, the house was filled with a quiet joy that pulsed like music in the air. He had started babbling nonsense syllables, somewhere between a laugh and a shout, his tiny fingers always reaching out for whatever came into view. The garden outside was in full bloom. Marigolds, tulips, and rose bushes my father had planted long ago flourished again, like they were cheering me on. I stood on the porch that afternoon, holding James close against my chest, swaying gently as the wind danced through the leaves. I thought back on the woman I was only a few months ago, scared, alone, desperate to hold things together that were already broken. The woman who begged Logan to come with her to the ultrasound. Who left room at the table for someone who never came. I didn't recognize her anymore. She was gone. And in her place stood someone stronger. I turned and walked inside the house that was now fully ours. Lila had helped me paint the nursery ceiling with soft stars and constellations, and she'd just finished setting up a small writing corner by the window where I could work while James napped. I had accepted a part-time editorial job at a non-profit advocacy publication. They told me my story had changed the way they covered women's rights. But one part of my father's letter echoed louder with every passing week. Don't just protect your son. Show him what strength looks like. So that's what I did. The final blow came quietly. I received a letter from Henderson and Wood, informing me that Logan had submitted a formal request to relinquish all parental rights. No hearing. No drama. Just a signature. In the letter, he acknowledged that he had created irreversible emotional harm, and while he didn't admit guilt directly, he stated he was choosing to step back in the child's best interest. It was a relief, yes. But also an admission of defeat wrapped in legal formality. He'd lost. Not in a courtroom this time, but in the mirror. Megan disappeared from social media entirely after she was let go from her firm. Penelope stopped sending letters. The entire Pierce family vanished like smoke, once a looming storm, now just a memory. And somehow, I didn't even need revenge to feel whole. That Sunday, I hosted a small gathering for local mothers at 115 Maple Lane. Women who had read my story. Women who had their own. We sat under the cherry trees while our babies played on blankets in the grass. We laughed. We cried. We traded stories not of suffering, but of survival. One woman brought a journal filled with quotes she had written down from my original post. She handed it to me, smiling. You reminded me that silence doesn't protect us. It only protects those who hurt us. I ran my hand over the cover and nodded. Then let's stay loud. That night, as I rocked James to sleep, I looked out the nursery window at the stars twinkling above the maple trees. The wind was calm, like a sigh of peace settling over the world. I reached into the top drawer of my desk and pulled out my father's letter again. The ink was smudged in places from the tears I'd cried reading it the first time. But tonight, I didn't cry. I smiled. Because I finally understood what he meant. He hadn't just left me money or property. He had left me freedom. A chance to begin again, without strings. Without shame. Without the constant fear of being unloved or unseen. James stirred in my arms, his eyes fluttering open for just a second. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "You're going to grow up knowing the truth, not just about what we survived, but about what we built." That night, I drafted a new essay. A follow-up. The box my father left me, Why I'll Never Wait for Permission to Be Strong Again. It went viral. Again. But this time, it wasn't just my inbox that flooded. It was my life, with purpose, with gratitude, with women reaching out to build something bigger. A movement. A resource network. A platform to elevate stories like mine, like Chloe's, like the thousands of others who hadn't known how to speak before. We launched a foundation in my father's name, the Frank Carter Fund for Women's Protection and Independence. Lila became our director of operations. I led communications. And slowly, we turned pain into power. 1 year later, on James's first birthday, we held a picnic in the garden. Lila brought a cake shaped like a storybook. Chloe came too, with her newborn daughter. I looked around at all the women, all the children, all the light gathered in one place, and realized something. I had thought I was losing everything when Logan left me in that hospital room. But the truth was, I was gaining everything that mattered. Not just a son. But a self I could be proud of. A name no one could rewrite. A future no one else could dictate. So to those who ever doubted me, who left, who lied, who plotted, I say this. You broke something you never even tried to understand. But I rebuilt it stronger, louder, brighter. And I did it while holding the hand of a little boy who will grow up never wondering if he is loved. He'll know. Because I will never let him forget how hard I fought to make sure of it. Some stories don't need revenge. They need truth. Bonita didn't just walk away, she rose. For every woman who's been abandoned, silenced, or underestimated, remember this: strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it arrives in quiet, steady steps that lead you home. If Bonita's story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories on Revenge Echoes. Because sometimes, the best revenge is reclaiming your life.